to soak this in? The Prince, a Pan-Africanism. You in Washington, make some noise, Black Panther.
Out of all these taxes, they can't get no good marks.
Test 1, 2. Black power in
Black
here.
power. Black power.
Put your hands together for Brother Andre for making this happen, brother. In Seattle, 6.8% of black boys are subject to disciplinary action. That is compared to 2.5% overall for boys in Seattle public schools. That 6.8% is higher than the 5% of disciplinary action against Native American males. That 6.8% for black males in Seattle is greater than the 1% for Asian or white males. It's even greater than the 3.5% for Hispanic males. In Seattle, only 59% of special education children graduated in 2017. That's compared to 30% of black high schools graduates who attended a 4-year collegiate institution. Only 30% of black children who graduated from high school in Seattle attended a 4-year institution. Only 57% of black boys in Seattle, throughout the state of Washington, graduated from high school. What makes these statistics so interesting is I compare them to the fact that black people are just 8% of Seattle and only 4% of the state of Washington. But yet and still, black people are incarcerated 6 times the amount of white people in Washington state, 4 times the amount of Hispanic people in Washington state, and twice that of Native Americans. How can we be much greater of the incarceration population? How can we be much higher the high school dropout population? How can we be much fewer the high school graduation population? Now, by profession, I'm a school psychologist. I'm a doctor of clinical psychology. I deal with mental illness, and I deal with special education. And I'm here to tell you all today that the #1 weapon that's being used to economically castrate and disenfranchise black males in Seattle and throughout Washington state is special education. I want to be clear. This coming Sunday, I'll be giving a lecture in Atlanta, Georgia on 65 years since the school desegregation law. 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. They outlawed the use of race in the schools. But 20 years later, the federal government, through special education, outlawed segregation based on disability. So what I'm saying to all of you here, especially our parents, is you have to slow down getting your children evaluated for special education. What I find interesting is that we come from ancestors who once upon a time it was illegal to learn how to read. But yet many of them still taught themselves under the threat of death, under the threat of incarceration, under the threat of the lash. So can you explain to me how 200 years ago black people could teach themselves how to read without a teacher? And here we are 200 years later, and your child needs special education in order to learn how to read. Let me tell you what's really going on. It's not that your son has a reading disability. He has a lazy disability.
Yes, sir.
It's not that your daughter has a math disability. She has a lazy disability. See, the worst thing for a black child is to have a teacher who don't care and a parent who couldn't care less. If it were up to me, we would not diagnose the children. We would diagnose the homes they come from. Because truth be told, there is absolutely nothing wrong with your child's ability to learn except the fact that you believe that there's something wrong. And as someone who's an expert school psychologist, I've evaluated children for over 20 years. And the number one conclusion I reach when I evaluate your babies is very simple. The issue here is not a learning disability. It is an absence of instructional opportunity disability. Many of our children are not taught the way that they need to be taught. And most of special ed is reading. 85% of all special ed referrals are for reading challenges. 85%. And it's getting higher. Because now they have more distractions than we had when we went to school. When I went to school, there was no Instagram, there was no Facebook, there was no Snapchat, there was no websites. So now the time we used to spend learning how to read, we're using it social networking. And as a result of that, special education referrals are going up. But I blame you, the parent. Because as a school psychologist, I cannot evaluate for ADHD. I cannot evaluate for conduct disorder. I cannot evaluate for oppositional defiant disorder. I cannot test them for math disability. I cannot evaluate for autism unless you give me permission. And what I want you parents to understand is whenever we evaluate your child and classify them for a need for special education, their name goes into a computer that goes to the State Department of Education in Washington, and by the end of the month, the school gets a welfare check for miseducating your child. Special education, brothers and sisters, it is a hustle. Special education is a racket. Special education is a business of making money off black boys you know you never taught in the first place. Let us be clear. Let us be absolutely clear. That had the schools never desegregated, special education wouldn't exist. Let us be absolutely clear. Special education was the weapon that they used to resegregate black and brown boys from the white ones when they were deemed unfit to be in that classroom. Your child has no business being in a special education classroom all day long. Even if you think they got a little bit of problem, they only need a little bit of help. So if a child got a little bit of problem and only need a little bit of help, why they get so much special education? If you got a reading problem, you should only be in special ed for what class?
Reading.
And if you have a math problem, you should only be in special ed for what class? Math. So why is your son in special ed for math, reading, science, gym, lunch, recess, class, school? It is against the law. It is absolutely against the law. We hear a lot about the black boy and how special he is and how the black boy needs this and the black boy needs that. And I'm here to tell you that the black boy can learn just as much as any other child. The black boy can sit still just as much as any other child. The problem is not the black boy, but the way the black boy is treated that's making the difference here. Let's be clear about this. See, schools are largely dominated by female energy. Most teachers are women. So when a boy walks into a school, he's walking into a female-dominated institution. And when the black boy walks into school, he is twice discriminated against because first he's a boy and second he's black. In fact, he is black male. And so what we have to recognize is that if we want to make sure we can reach our boys, we have to make sure that they got men in those classrooms who look just like this.
Yes, sir.
You can eliminate this problem in Seattle overnight by giving every black boy a strong black male teacher, and you cut the situation in half. But there's a problem there. Because the most revolutionary thing you could do in America is properly educate the black boy. Because if you properly educate the black boy in Seattle, you automatically put him in a position to challenge the white male for economic independence.
Yes, sir.
I find it quite interesting that Seattle leads the nation. You have the second largest income disparity in the entire country. The only city that exceeds Seattle is Fresno, California. And at the same time, you have the third largest and growing homeless rate. How can one of the richest cities have the most homeless people? is because there is an inequity in income distribution. See, here's a lie. And there's a myth that goes around that says the reason poor people are poor is because they're lazy. There's a lie that says the reason poor people don't have resources is because they don't work hard enough. Well, I'm here to dispel that rumor, and I'm here to tell you the reason why poor people don't have the wealth or the opportunities of rich people is because we do not systematically present them with those opportunities to access the wealth. If we want to end homelessness in Seattle, if we want to end poverty in Seattle, then we have to create a system that allows black folk and disenfranchised individuals to access wealth through the banks so they can start their own businesses because jobs are open. Jobs are open. And one of the reasons our young men don't like going to high school is not because they don't want to learn, but the instruction is high school is no longer a functional instruction. If you go back in history, up until 1970, you did not need a college education in order to get a decent job and live a decent life. Most of us got grandparents who live decent lives, more comfortable than us with our master's degrees. But something happened after they assassinated Dr. King. On April 4th, 1968, after the Dr. King assassination, the FBI and the U.S. government said we can never allow the black dollar to finance black power ever again. So in the 1970s, they came into the inner city high schools, and guess what they did? They took out the carpentry program. They took out the plumbing program. They took out the welding program. They took out the electrical program. They took out the auto mechanic program. Up until the 1970s, we had the skills that could pay the bills. And after 1970, they would tell every last one of us that if you want to be successful in life, you got to run on off to college. And so off to college we went. And what we failed to recognize is by sending all of our young people to college, we automatically created a vacuum for other people to come into our community and do all the electric work, all the plumbing work, all the carpentry work, all the infrastructure work. And so now what do we got in Seattle? Just like we got all across America. Millions of black people with college degrees who are unemployed and broke. If it was up to me, every black boy in Seattle would go to trade school before he could go to trade school is because it only takes 2 years. He's not likely to rack up a whole bunch of college loan debt. And if he wants to go to college after he becomes a licensed plumber, after he becomes a licensed electrician, after he becomes a licensed welder, he'll be able to pay his own way through college. Parents, don't be so quick to send your child off to college. You say, Dr. Umar, why do you say that? You have 6 college degrees. That might be true. But I also went to college in 1992. One of the last years when having a college degree was actually relevant for black America. I just so happened to get lucky because being a psychologist, as long as black people are crazy, I will have a job. If your child doesn't want to take up a trade, I'll send him to real estate school. If it was up to me, if your child don't want to take up a trade, I'll send him to stock investment school. If it was up to me, if your child don't want to take up a trade, I will make them apprentice to a very successful business owner so they can learn the ins and outs of how to operate that business. We have to recognize something. We were sold a hustle. And it was the higher education hustle. Raise your hand in here if you owe student loan debt. Put your hands up. Look at all the student loan debt in this room. Put your hands down. Let me tell you how the system works. The system tells us that if you don't have a degree, you can't work this job. So you go and get the degree and you come back and they say, well, you still don't have enough credits that we need. So you go back and get you a master's degree. And you come back and they say, once again, you still don't have enough credits. You go back and get a second master's. They say you're still a little bit short. You go back and get your doctorate. And now you come back this time. First they told you was underqualified. Now they tell you
overqualified.
It's a hustle situation. So I want my parents to be clear. Let me be absolutely clear. There is no way you can prove a learning disability. Is an opinion. Let me be absolutely clear. There is no way you can prove mild mental retardation, the intellectual disability, it is an opinion. Let me be absolutely clear. The emotional disturbance is an opinion. The oppositional defiant disorder is an opinion. So when you tell me my son has a reading disability, you're not stating a fact. You're only telling me how gullible you were because you were so quick to follow somebody else's opinion about your life. To my young people in here, because we got a lot of young people. The first thing I want you to learn as a young person is the most important thing you must master. Because no matter how high you go in life or how low you go, it would all depend on how much of this you have developed within yourself. It is the most powerful word in the universe, and that word is discipline. And I want to give you Dr. Umar Johnson's definition of discipline, young people. It is the ability to do what you don't want to do when it has to be done, whether you like it or not. You need that. For my parents in the room, it makes no sense that so many of my little black brothers, and I'm including my Afro-Latino brothers in there too, we all come from the mother continent, but it makes no sense for so many of our boys to be prescribed Ritalin in Seattle, Adderall in Seattle, Concerta in Seattle, Medicaid in Seattle, Prozac, Paxil, Risperdal, Depakote, giving your children drugs because you never taught them the discipline of self-control. Let me tell you how the pill works. Let me explain to you how the pill works. When you introduce the chemical into your child's bloodstream, it goes up into the brain. And the purpose of the chemical is to force the brain neurologically to do what your conscious will refuses to do. The pill is a substitute for your weak willpower. That's all it is. So when you give your son those 5 milligrams of Ritalin and those 5 milligrams of Concerta, let me also make it clear to you that you're giving him nothing other than synthesized cocaine. Right. Wow. Ritalin is 1 molecule away from crack. Adderall is 1 molecule away from crack. Concerta is 1 molecule away from crack. Isn't it hypocritical to send thousands of black brothers from Seattle to prison every year for selling crack? But you take that same crack, put it in a bottle, call it Ritalin, and give it to his son so he can sit still long enough to learn about Christopher Columbus. I'm gonna wrap this up. When I travel the country, the superintendents love to ask me, Dr. Umar, what can we do to solve our black male problem? There's 5 quick things you can do. Number 1, give every black boy a black male teacher. That's the first thing you're going to do. Number 2, bring the industrial building trade programs back into the community.
Yes. Bro, that's something I want to push for.
Introduce business and economics as a course in high school so they can understand the importance of it. Number 4, get them working back in the community as a way to earn credits towards college graduation. Because if they don't see the relationship between economics and education, there may be no education.
Yes, sir.
Any teacher who cannot do their job should not have it. And as a former school principal, I can tell you better than most. Public education is the one area, the one profession in America where you cannot be fired for not knowing how to do your job well. If my teacher cannot teach, I can write him up. I can write her up. I can put them on a professional improvement program. I can send them to all the staff developments. And if I complain enough, they'll send them from the east side of Seattle to go and miseducate somebody else's child on the west side of Seattle. That's no solution. But I want to talk about another problem we got. That's miseducation, but there's a 5-headed monster that's attacking us. In black America, it's a 5-headed monster. Miseducation is one. The second is gentrification.
Oh, yes!
And I'm noticing that they're pushing black folks out of Seattle. I've been paying attention. And I want you to be clear. They're using the universities and the charter schools to do it. I've been paying attention. Whenever you want to get rid of black folks, you do it through education. You open up a charter school. You send the local universities into the community. Why are they so effective with ethnically cleansing you that way? Because who wants to oppose education? If the local university comes into the ghetto and says we're going to open a halfway house, or we're going to open a program for teenage parents, or we're going to open up a homeless shelter, you wouldn't turn that down. But what you fail to recognize is that they're buying up the whole neighborhood. They're silently raising up the tax property rates in that neighborhood, and they're going to force you up out of it. Now, I did see a program from the city here in Seattle where they would have built about 3,200 affordable apartments to help fight the gentrification. But what good is that if the property tax is going up so ridiculously high and so quickly that most of those people won't even be around to enjoy those new apartments that you are building? Gentrification is residential racism. Call it what it is. And you have to hold your elected officials accountable for doing that. Because real estate decisions are made 10 years in advance. They knew 10 years ago
Mario?
to gentrify Seattle. So my question to the black elected officials, and I don't know any of them, so I'm not speaking personally, I'm speaking generally. If you knew they were going to start cleaning black people out of Seattle 10 years ago, why the hell you didn't tell us about it?
Hell yeah.
That's why when people come looking for a vote from me, I got some questions. You don't get my vote for free. You don't get my vote because you're Democrat, and you don't get my vote just because you're black. I'm going to ask you some questions. The first question I'm going to ask you is
Dr. Umar Johnson. He's just spitting with me, spitting that real, man.
Is what are you doing to grow new black?
You need to go back and watch him at the beginning of this video. He's a cold cat if you ain't ever seen him before. For real though.
Talk about how black boys and black males got an issue with crime. But let's go back in American history. We weren't the original drug dealers. We weren't the original gang bangers. If you go back to the 1920s, it was the Irish, the Italians, the European Jews. They were the gang bangers. They were the bootleggers. They were the drug runners. But then all of a sudden, in 1940, the federal government decided to upgrade them to white status. Because up until 1940, if you were white, Irish, or Italian, you were not white. And so when they upgraded the Irish, the Jews, and the Italians, they gave the Italians the police department. Then they gave the Irish the fire department. They gave the European Jewish community the civil service municipal city jobs that many of them still control to this day. In other words, they gave them an economic stimulus package. Where is black America's economic stimulus package? Where is black Seattle's economic stimulus package?
Yeah, what up?
We also have to hold our black organizations accountable. I love the black church. I'm a descendant of black preachers, but I got a problem with any religious leader who's prepared me for heaven after I die. If the white man got his heaven now, why can't I have
mine? Wow! Say that, brother! What did he say? Say it again! Say it again! That's right.
I have no problem with the black church. I have no problem with the black mosque or any spiritual tradition we have. They are all great, but don't tell me I got to die to experience the happiness that other people are experiencing right now.
Right, motherfucking man.
If you say I'm a citizen of your city, prove it. If you say I'm a citizen of your state, prove it. If you say I'm a citizen of your country, then prove it. We got to understand something. We're about to cross the 400-year finish line. August the 20th of this year, we talk about 400 years under white oppression in America. And brothers and sisters, we are sliding backwards, and the reason we're sliding backwards is because we stopped fighting. And yes, we did. We stopped fighting. Just this past weekend, I was in Selma, Alabama, where they did that infamous march on March the 7th of 1965, where the police attacked our brothers and sisters. It's been 60 years since then, and we ain't had a fight since then. Say what you want to say about Dr. King, but at least Dr. King was about the X's and the O's. Realizing political advancement, he couldn't do it all, but Dr. King had more than a dream, and his agenda was more than just voting in the Civil Rights Act. Dr. King was murdered because he wanted to fight for economic opportunity. Redistribution of wealth. Don't let me out of slavery and tell me I'm a citizen and tell me I'm free, but you don't give me anything to build a living and an opportunity with. You got to give me my share of America before you call me an American. I want my money before you entitle me to your citizenship. And I want to say this as I close. To the young people again, the two most important decisions of your life and you better hear me well. Get these two things right, you will be happy and successful. You get them wrong, life can be a long, hard road. The first one is decide what you want to do with your life. Are you going to be an attorney, or you want to be an engineer? Because I'm not totally opposed to college. I'm a psychologist. You got to go to college to be one. But if you're not wanting something that requires a college degree, I don't think you necessarily need to be there. And don't choose your life's work based on how much money you expect to make. Too many young people are pursuing careers because they expect to get paid. You cannot do that. Choose the career because your heart is in it. I was in the third grade, and I'm coming to you, Brother Andre. I was in the third grade when I decided I wanted to be a psychologist. I didn't know how much money they made. I didn't know black folks was crazy. I found that out later. But I love being a psychologist. I love helping people feel better about themselves. And whether I got paid for it or not, I would still do the work because I love it. Choose something you love. When I was working on my doctoral degree, I had to do my therapy runs in the clinic at our college. And the #1 reason that the white college students came into the Center for Brief Therapy was they were becoming doctors, not for themselves, but for their mothers and fathers and grandparents. And they would come and cry to me that I don't even want to be a doctor. I had one student 1 week away from graduation who told me he don't even like the sight of blood. Wow. You got to choose your career for you. And the second of those questions, after you decide what you want to do with your life, young people, you decide who you're going to spend your life with. To my young women, my young beautiful queens, take your time to find the man that's right for you. We got too much thirst running around. Going back. And let me be clear, teenage pregnancy is a problem for us, but it has nothing to do with sex. Teenage pregnancy is about black fatherlessness. That little girl got pregnant not because she was hot between the legs, but she was heavy in her heart for love from a father that she never had. If we make sure our little girls will get the men they like that they need, you will see teenage pregnancy drop right on by. So young people, choose your career with patience and choose the person you're going to spend your life with patience. Because if you love your job and love your spouse, you're going to have a happy life. But if you hate your job and love your spouse, you will never want to go to work. And if you love your job and hate your spouse, you will never want to go home. I want to close.
That's my dude, man.
Frederick Douglass. My family was brought to America in 1701. A black man by the name of Bailey, stolen from the Nigerian nation. He was brought to Talbot County, Eastern Shore, Maryland. He married a black woman by the same name of Selah, for whom my 7-year-old daughter is named. In 1745, Grandma Selah gave birth to Grandma Jenny. In 1774, 2 years before the Declaration of Independence, Grandma Jenny gave birth to Grandma Betsy Bailey. Grandma Betsy was born enslaved, but she married a free black man by Grandpa Isaac. They had 12 children. One daughter was named Harriet, another daughter was named Young Betsy after her mother. These two sisters were raped by Aaron Anthony, the white man who owned my family, whose grandson I met a couple years ago. As a result of that rape in 1818, Aunt Harriet gave birth to the greatest black leader in American history, Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. In 1838, Uncle Fred ran away from slavery. He changed his name to hide his identity.
Oh, brother, you know it, bro.
And so Frederick Bailey became Frederick.
I wish he was here with us.
In 1819, my 4-time great-grandfather, Stephen Henry Bailey, was born from the rape of my 6-time great-grandmother, Betsy Bailey. Frederick and Stephen were cousins because their mothers were sisters, but they were also brothers because the slave master raped 2 sisters. Wow. Grandpa Stephen didn't get a chance to run away from slavery. He married Grandma Caroline. She didn't learn how to read until the NAACP was founded in 1909. The Civil War begins in 1861. My grandfather Stephen and my grandfather George fought side by side in the United States Colored Troops of Maryland. Uncle Fred didn't fight, but he sent his 2 sons, my cousins Lewis and Charles. They went north to Boston. They fought in the infamous Massachusetts 54th Colored Regiment. If you ever seen the movie Glory, Morgan Freeman and Denzel, that's the movie of the sons of Frederick Douglass and my cousins. When the Civil War is over, Grandpa George becomes the first black public school teacher in Eastern Shore, Maryland. He marries Grandma Annie. They had Grandma Caroline. She moves to Philadelphia. She has Grandma Vivian. Grandma Vivian marries a Spanish-speaking Cuban immigrant from Havana, Cuba, my great-grandfather Cicero. They get married. I had my grandmama Ida Johnson, who just passed away April the 30th of 2018. She met and married James Johnson from the South. They had Jamal Johnson, my father. He meets Barbara. And on August the 21st in North Philadelphia, the anniversary of the Haitian Revolution. August the 21st, the anniversary of the Nat Turner War. August the 21st, the anniversary of the George Jackson War. August the 21st, the anniversary of the Fugitive Slave Convention. Umar Johnson was born in North Philadelphia. I'll leave you with this quote. Frederick Douglass said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and depreciate agitation are like men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want the rain but can't stand the thunder or the ocean. They want the water but can't deal with the awful roar of its waves. He said, a man may not get all that he pays for in this world, but you will pay for all that you get. And if we are ever going to get free from the injustices heaped upon us as a people, we must pay for them with blood, with blows, or with our very lives. But for he who wants to be free, he himself must strike the first blow. Frederick said, for 20 years on my knees, for 20 years, I prayed to God for freedom. But the good Lord gave Frederick no freedom till I got up off my knees. Yeah. For black people, why do you ask for pity? The man who pities you will never respect you, and the man who respects you has no need for pity. And I close with the words of the most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, who said, young people, without confidence in yourself, you are twice defeated in the race of life. Without confidence in yourself, you are twice defeated in the race of life. But with confidence, you have won even before you have started. Black power!
Black power! Woo! Black power!